Noted before on the return back from lunch is safety versus efficiency. Are we going far enough to ensure safety for the future? And during the recent Arab Fiscal Forum, I had a chance to interview the finance minister of Egypt, Hani Dimnian, and we discussed the setback from the bombing that we saw of the Russian jetliner around Sharm el-Sheikh, which has still been a setback for the Egyptian resort tourism industry, trying to get back up to 17 million visitors overall. Our next topic will look at safety versus efficiency, particularly as we start to have an economic slowdown. Let me welcome Jens Flotow, the managing editor of Commercial for Aviation Week, and he'll introduce his four panelists this afternoon. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon. I promise I will take questions. Let me just introduce the panel to you. Right next to me, Captain Billy Nolan, who is Senior Vice President, Safety, Security and Operations at Airlines for America. Captain Majed Al-Marzouki, who is Vice President of Corporate Safety and Quality at Etihad. Hussein Dabas, Regional Vice President, Africa and the Middle East at IATA, and Captain Patrick Gordon, the CEO of Royal Jet here in Abu Dhabi. I guess we all agree that this industry is very safe already, and the latest figures for 2015 that have just been published by IATA a few weeks ago are a testament of that again. But in preparing for this panel, I've asked myself the question, what is the single most significant safety issue that the industry still faces? And I've kind of come up with loss of control and the question how this industry can manage to keep its pilots as proficient as possible as aircraft become even more automated. Just think about cases like Air France 447, TransAsia, Asiana 214 in San Francisco, the Asia-Indonesia accident in late 2014. So there have been occurrences that the industry needs to take very seriously. So my first question is, do you agree with the observation that this is the single most serious issue?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I would agree with the opening statement that we are indeed in one of the safest periods within commercial aviation history. That has come with a lot of hard work and effort, mostly from virtually everything we've heard today about new technology, emerging technology, safety management systems, all of this coming together to create a industry that the world itself globally can be very proud of. That being said, there are challenges that remain when we think about things like loss of control. And I think certainly everyone here on the panel, and I think around the globe, this is an issue we will continue to work to explore every option we can. It's a very collaborative approach to how we do it. And I'll certainly defer to my colleagues here, but I can tell you, looking at it from the industry level, you're trying to find every single angle of which you can address those periods where there's a loss of control issue.
Captain Majid, would you agree as well?
Well, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. It's one of the high-risk area where the industry is continuously looking at. I mean, looking in reports and numbers, it's not one of the highest in frequency, but when it happens, the impact or the consequences are quite high. However, there's a lot of working groups and a lot of studies and a lot of initiatives to manage and mitigate this issue. And obviously there's a series of activities that happen to address this issue and try to find solutions to this problem.
So Patrick, your operation is relatively small. You have 11 aircraft. You fly to lots of different places. You have to absolutely make sure your pilots know what they're doing, so to say, right?
First of all, I'd like to thank all 12 of you out in the audience for staying with us this afternoon. Keeping us company, we'll try and keep you awake, and we hope we can keep you interested. Royal Jet is a unique company. We only have 11 airplanes, but last year we flew into 300 airports in over 100 countries around the world, which is a pretty good score for such a small company. We'd match our performance against virtually any other aircraft operator in the world. And one of the things we do, because we are so concerned about our pilots being able to, or at least remembering how to hand fly the airplane, typically pilots go through a recurrent training program on a 6-month basis, and they'll have a 4-hour block of simulator training where they go through the same routine time after time after time. But we've decided to add a 5th hour of training. And this 5th hour is nothing but hand flying the airplane. We go through jet upsets, instrument approaches, non-precision approaches, circling approaches, takeoffs, landings. We don't do it all in this 1 hour, of course, but we spread that out over the year between the captain and the co-pilot. We want to make 100% sure that the guys up front do remember how to hand fly the airplane. We find that very, very important. We have 2 really high-tech airplanes that are Global 5000s that are as high-tech as anything in the airline industry today. And one of the things that I find concerning is the fact that we are getting so high-tech. I think it's wonderful for the efficient operation of the airplane. But I kind of wonder, are we leaving the pilot behind with this advance in technology? I can remember years ago when it was a really big deal if you could fly Abu Dhabi to, or London to Abu Dhabi nonstop. And I would sit there like this for hours and hours. In fact, this chair reminds me of the seat, with my chin in my hand and my elbow on the armrest, just watching things. But we had a lot of round dials to look at back in those days. A lot of switches to keep checking, outside checking. Now I see a new generation of pilots coming in that are more systems operators and systems monitors than they are pilots. I think we're losing, or have lost, perhaps in a generation of pilots, the ability to hand fly the airplane, especially when it enters straight into an emergency or an unusual situation. Back when I learned to fly, which was about 112 years ago, my flight instructor was really brilliant. He did wonders for me back then. And he used to tell me, Pat, just remember FTFA. Okay, Marvin, what's that? And I clean it up for modern audiences, but it's fly the friggin' airplane. And he would cause me problems in the airplane while we're flying around. One case I remember we're flying, he pops open the door on his side of the airplane in flight. I said, Marvin, shut the door for Pete's sake. He said, I don't know how. He said, you have to get it for me. So I figured, okay, this is some kind of a test. So it was, if anybody here remembers the old Cherokee 40 days, it's quite a tight little cockpit with an overhead latch on the door. So I'm trying to fly the airplane. We're way out in the middle of Missouri over a forest preserve with no other traffic for 1,000,000 miles. And I'm flying the airplane and trying to slam the door and it's not working. And Marvin finally looks at me and he said, Pat, and again, I'm wandering all over the place because I'm not concentrating on flying. Marvin said, Pat, FTFA. And yeah? He said, as long as you're flying, you're not dying. Take your time, figure out what the problem is, work it out, and then settle the problem. So I mean, of course, there's too much vacuum in here. Outward pressure, I guess it's the opposite of vacuum. But I couldn't close the door against the compressed air in the cabin. This airplane has a tiny little pilot's vent here. And finally I thought, I opened that, closed the door with one hand, latch it, close the vent, and everything's wonderful again. But I wonder if kids today get that really kind of hands-on training when they get so much of their flight time in simulators and so much time monitoring computer systems.
So, Hussein, do you think the industry as a whole has identified that risk soon enough? Is it doing enough right now to address this?
I am sure all airlines, and definitely IATA and A4A as well as ICAO and all these organizations have safety as their top priority for the aviation industry. And let's be honest here, throughout the 100 years history of commercial aviation, we have moved a long way of becoming really one of the safest modes of transportation. And that is due to the effort of everybody involved in the aviation industry. I mean, if we look at last year, the aviation industry carried over 3.5 billion passengers. And again, maybe this is a bit too much, but only 136 fatalities due to, mechanical or mismanagement reasons. So this is really still 136 more than what we should have. But in reality, it is a safe transportation, and I think everybody's working very hard on making sure that it continues to be. We in IATA, of course, as you know, we have the IOSA program, which is basically no member can join IATA unless they have passed the IOSA. And we now have over 400 airlines that have continued to be IOSA members, even though we have only 260 members in IATA, which means that airlines want to have the IOSA system implemented, even though they're not part of the IATA system. So it's something that is becoming part of the day in, day out process of airlines, and safety remains to be the major concern of everyone that operates in the aviation industry.
And if I can,
Sure, go ahead.
if I can add just to the comment that Pat said, one thing is fundamental here is the investment on training. Going back to the basic of flying, Airbus golden rules: aviate, navigate, communicate. So loss of control, it could happen. What's important is for the pilots to recognize it and get out of that loss of control. And that happens when you go back to basic flying.
Yeah. So you're an A330 captain. You spent decades flying for American. How, if you look at how training has changed in the past few years in at American, has it changed enough?
I certainly think there has been a strong evolution. When I started my career at American Airlines, almost 28 years ago, I started out as a flight engineer in a 727 round dials, progressed to, by the time I left American, as an international captain on the 767. So you look over that period of time, certainly technology has evolved. How we train pilots and crews has evolved from the early days of what was called cockpit resource management, or CRM, to today what's commonly referred to as human factors training. How you bring that together in terms of decision making, the benefit of technology today. I think one of the clear benefits of technology is the ability that when a scenario happens in the world that is unfortunate and has resulted in an unfortunate outcome, it is not quite instantaneous, but very close, and shortly thereafter, airlines can put that into their training package, into their training scenarios, and be able to quickly get their crews over a period of time up to speed on some latest event. Maybe it's a high altitude, low speed event. Maybe it's a runway excursion where you had braking action that was poor. So you can take all of these here, or you can do ways of adding to the pilot's workload so that they learn how to perform well on the stress. So looking across just not only my career, but I'm sure my peers on the stage as well, but across the industry from where I sit, I think we've certainly come a long way. We're talking about loss of control, which are really small numbers. They get a lot of press. But on the whole, airlines, and you heard it from CEOs here today, operate an incredibly efficient and safe operations.
Captain Majid, I think Etihad has introduced evidence-based training. Can you talk about that for a moment?
We moved away from what we used to have, I would call it the legacy training mechanism, into a new scheme of training, and it has been implemented 6 months ago, which is evidence-based training. So taking the data from the industry and from our day-to-day operation, where we get all this information from our safety management system, flight data monitoring, and incidents that happen in the world as well, and then take it back and feed it into our training organization where they develop courses or training program to enhance the pilot's competency and decision makings and to enable the pilots to deal with the unforeseen conditions. So I think that's the way forward, and that's a way of building up and complementing the loss of skills because of automation and because of the sophistication of the machines that the pilots are dealing with, where the skills are fading away. So we are now pushing the skills back into the pilots to enable them to deal with the situations that is unforeseen and they're unable to deal with.
We're talking about technology here as a risk for the moment, but of course there's opportunity there as well. Can we talk about that for a moment? Where do you see, I think Royaljet is introducing enhanced vision systems on board of part of its fleet. Maybe, and it has a safety benefit too, right?
Yeah. For those people in the audience who may not be familiar with what Enhanced Vision System is, or EVS, it starts with a camera in the nose of the airplane that works as an infrared camera, and then a millimeter wave radar system as well. And then there's a heads-up display in the cockpit that folds down from the ceiling of the cockpit over the windshield. And when you operate the system, you watch it through the heads-up display. And if you really want to see something interesting, get on Google and just Google EVS, because they have some different sites on there that will show you what the pilot sees flying with the EVS system activated and without it activated. And it's really quite amazing. To me, I think that's the most important aviation cockpit device that's come along in years, especially for the kind of flying we do at Royaljet. Because we'll go around the world in our travels, we'll go into the heaviest, busiest airports in the world, LAX, Chicago O'Hare, London, Heathrow, but then we'll also go into small landing strips in the middle of Pakistan. And in the wintertime in Pakistan, you have a haze layer that extends from about 5,000 feet to the surface, because everybody in the entire country seems to be cooking over wooden fires or some kind of cooking fire. There's a high pressure system above it, so it's kind of an inversion that keeps the smoke depressed. As you fly over the airport, you can look straight down and see it. As you start to make the approach, and inevitably they're all non-precision approaches, you have no horizontal visibility through this stuff. So with EVS, it cuts through that beautifully with it. So we have 2 airplanes equipped with it now, the Global 5000s. We have 2 brand new Boeing business jets coming the end of this year, and there'll be a couple of the only Boeing business jets in the world that has it installed on them as well. And we're also the first charter company that I know of in the region that has regulatory approval to use this system. Now, we can use it in a training, we're using it in a practice mode. And as we get better, we'll take check rides, and then they will lower, the regulatory authorities will lower our landing minimums, so it'll give us an added benefit from that. But it's amazing, amazing technology, and do get on Google and take a look at it. You'll be amazed to see the difference that the pilots see.
You know, one thing I would add, I know we titled this Safety versus Efficiency, and I think, when I think about that, it's not a zero-sum game. You can have both. And I think if you look at the emergence of technology today, if you look at the rollout of next gen, especially within North America, but not only within North America, but globally, all of this allows CEOs, airlines, the executives in this room to be able to take advantage, fly the aircraft more efficiently, and fly them safer, and add a level of safety. It's all about managing risk in the system, and I think those are some of the things that technology has allowed for. So when I sort of see this either or, it's easy to get into an argument, am I safe or am I efficient, as opposed to saying we can be both, have an absolute level of safety, and can be an efficient airline as well. And in fact, that's what it will take to be successful and to have a sustainable enterprise in the future.
I'm not a pilot. I'm sitting amongst pilots here who know much more about it than I'll ever do. But the cockpit has become such an advanced machine that pilots are now managing the flight more than just flying it. And there's talk now about maybe not having a crew on the pilot and that somebody else can fly it from the ground, which we as IATA don't see that this is happening in the near future, because we always believe there should be some human working on this machine, making sure that it works well and efficiently. And there were some incidents or accidents that took place, like the Hudson River US Air flight, that had there not been a pilot in that aircraft, it would have been a different result altogether. So even though the cockpits and the planes have become very sophisticated, they really manage the flight in a very perfect way, but the pilots and the training of the pilots is still a very important factor in making sure that the safety and security of the operation continues.
Taking a look at this region in particular, obviously airlines are growing very fast. We all know that. I think there must be two challenges. One, getting enough good pilots, and B, getting all these different cultures integrated. They all come from different backgrounds, different countries, different societies. How do you manage that? First of all, are there enough good pilots to continue this growth right now? Hussein, Majid?
Well, there's no such a thing called good pilots or bad pilots. There's always a good pilot and a better pilot. That's how I look at it.
Of course. Sorry.
Having lack of pilots in the industry is a well-known fact across all airlines in the world, so it's not something that we are not familiar with. However, what's important is to attract the right set of pilots who fits the organization, and they enable us within their organization is very important and fundamental as well. Having said that, having a strong selection process to make sure that they go through a right filtration process to pick up the best after the best of what's available in the market is important. And at the same time, once they're on board, it's very important for each organization to see how they can invest in their training. The regulatory requirement always a bare minimum. So what the company can do extra to make sure that they upskills the pilots into the appropriate level of standard as per to the organization need. And then what tools the organization can give to the pilots to allow them to do their work in a safe, efficient manner as well as fundamental. So it's a whole package here. We're not looking only for the pilot. Pilot is one element of success for the whole journey. And looking in the industry, there is always good pilots. There's always pilots who can meet the expectation. It's what organization can do to ensure that these pilots are succeeding in their role. It's very fundamental to this.
This region really, during the past 2 decades, have shown tremendous growth in the aircraft movement, in passenger growth, the number of airplanes. And in the Middle East region, we're seeing almost a 10% growth year on year, while the average world is growing around 6%. And we've seen, it's not just that the growth in the passengers or the airlines, but we're seeing really a major investment in the infrastructure on the ground, which is really unparalleled in many parts of the world. And I mean, if we look at Europe right now, the newest airport that was built in Europe was Munich, which is almost 20 years ago, and Berlin Airport has been closed.
I was going to say, don't forget Berlin.
Yeah, it's still closed for a while. Yet you're seeing, wherever you go in this region, airports are continuously being built, runways are being built, and to match the growth that we're seeing. Of course, that does require more pilots, require more cabin attendants, require more staff on all levels of the aviation. And we're seeing this being implemented very efficiently in this part of the world. And that's why we're seeing the growth continuing year on year. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not matched on other levels, like we discussed earlier on the air traffic management, where there is now some difficulties that are being faced because of the congestion, and we're seeing more airlines circling around more, maybe delayed on taxiways until they get the permit. But if we look at it from a holistic point of view, really the growth in this region and the efficiency that is taking place is unparalleled.
One thing extra to add as well, which I forgot to mention, is not only attracting pilots to the airlines, but one thing we do here in Etihad is we have the Ath Flight College, where we recruit our own cadet, and then we take them from scratch until we groom them into the role of becoming a senior first officer and then a future captain. So looking at the numbers in those pipelines is very promising. The quality of those pilots are amazing. I mean, I come from a cadet program as well. In my previous life, I went through the whole cadet program. And the investment that UAE does in the human capital to create pilots is phenomenal as well. So obviously, how we can compensate what's in the market and what the airline can do as well, it needs to work on both levels here.
The only thing I think I would add to this piece of it is, if you look at the major carriers globally, they've always had the ability to attract talent. Talent tends to go to where the market is. If there are any struggles out there, sometimes in the regional airlines, as they look for tomorrow's pilots. So trying to source tomorrow's pilots, it was talked about earlier, STEM training for engineers, and of course it isn't just pilots, you need them across every aspect of an airline, whether it be engineering, finance, you name it. But looking to the future pilot is how the regulator, how companies, how labor thinks about this all together, and I'm now just referring to North America, is getting people to think differently. We've always said it's always about the quality. I mean, there are those who argue for quantity, and quantity matters in some respect, but the quality of that training, the rigor with which is delivered, I think goes a long way. So certainly there's a lots of discussion on the national stage about where will tomorrow's pilots come from, and we're certainly looking for new and novel ways to make that happen.
Well, I guess in Etihad's case, they come from 140 different countries, right? That's a challenge in itself. I mean, you have to find a common standard, a common language, so to say. How do you handle this?
Very good question, and a very interesting question as well. I'm very happy that you asked this question, actually. Our president and CEO today, he mentioned 140 nationality. It creates a unique culture by itself. And I was involved from the day one on introducing safety management system in Etihad. And we worked with every stakeholders within the business to introduce the safety management system. And something that we are very proud of in Etihad as well. What we try to do in Etihad is we try to have a very unique language, which is Etihad language, one set of SOP, one common understanding, and that's not only for the pilots community or the cabin crew community, that's across the whole organization. The commitment, the support, and the message is very clear from our president and CEO that we are all, we talk one language, which is Etihad language. So the company takes a lot of initiatives. There's 2 days of introduction to the organization, what is expected from the employees. Our people in performance department, the way they manage all these intakes of new people coming into the organization, it's phenomenal. It's amazing, because what we try to create a harmony and a culture within the whole organization, that we work as a team. It's a winning behavior. We support each other. We are open to the system. The system is designed to support the people as well. So somehow, holistically, the vision that has been set and the work that happens between different departments, it pays off, and you see it in people.
So, I mean, you seem to describe a situation where it's actually an advantage that people come from many different backgrounds, because there's not one system established already that is hard to change. Would you all agree that that is the case?
Something interesting is that when you compare high-distance cultures and low-distance cultures, high distance is typically Asia, low distance is the West, no distance would be Australians, and you gotta love working with them, they're a delight. But when you have high distance culture and a low distance in the same cockpit, and they've had CRM training, I remember years ago it was quite interesting, because the high distance culture could get 100% on the written exam on CRM, but could not really activate it in the cockpit. It was just culturally impossible for him to do that. But over the years, this has kind of eased away, and I think aviation has been a great leveler of cultures in that area. I remember talking to people about it, senior leaders, and they would say, how can we change this and make our culture more low distance? I said, well, you've lived in a society for thousands of years. It's going to take a generation, maybe 2 generations. you have to give your kids the permission to question your judgment as a parent. And once they can do that, then once they get a little older and they get in the cockpit, they feel comfortable questioning the decisions of the captain. But if they hit that cockpit cold, just a CRM course isn't enough.
Linking it to the society here, you know, in UAE there's 8 million people from all over the world. So if you link the airline as one element in a whole society, and how people they live and interact together, it's amazing, and the engagement. So the culture that has been developed and evolved in Etihad is that we all talk one language and we are one organization. It doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is, you know, what's important is what is the objective of the organization and how we can drive in this journey.
So I want to stick to my promise here and open it up for questions. Please raise your hand if you want to ask. I would want to see you. In the front here, second row.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Thomas Pellegrin with PwC. Maybe a question for Hussein. You mentioned earlier, you know, IATA is not a believer in, automated cockpit operations. But we've gone from, 4 crew operations back in the 60s to maybe 3 crew operations, 70s, 2 crew operations now. Do you still foresee a space for maybe 1 man operation in the cockpit with remote support from the ground, especially with the work that NASA and Honeywell are doing in the US?
We don't see this happening in the near future. As I said earlier, even though the technology is there to run the aircraft mostly on its own, but we still need the human interface. And having a 2 cockpit crew, we believe, will be the minimum for the foreseeable future. We don't see it going down to 1, or definitely not seeing it going out without the cockpit crew, the 2 cockpit crew inside as well. No, we don't see that. Thanks.
If I may, when you're flying along, part of what we are training, part of what we are teaching the next generation of pilots, and even my generation of pilots, is when we think about active pilot monitoring, is sort of the phrase, the buzzword that's out there today, and you think about, back to the first question about loss of control, it is really, as the saying states, it's in that crewed environment. It is that ability for the pilot not flying to be actively monitoring to the extent that he or she sees something that it is out of the ordinary or is not in keeping with SOP, they're going to say something about it. Now, Pat spoke about high versus low, or high authority gradient versus low authority gradients. It is equipping new pilots to move beyond just saying, that looked like a rain shower up there. That's a statement. It doesn't really say to the person flying, should you consider a maneuver, could you consider diverting? So we're moving to a space today where we say that might be the first step. Oh, it looks like rain up ahead. To, wow, I'm looking at the radar and maybe I've got a level 30, I've got a lot of red showing on the radar screen. To, hey Captain, what do you think about that? Doesn't look good. Should we divert? Now I've gone from just a statement to a suggestion. To the extent that you don't get him or her to react, the next one is something that's more forceful. We're moving to what we call assertiveness with respect. Captain, I'm not comfortable with our direction of flight. I think we should divert. And at some point, you can either raise this even further. Now, this is a move away from where we've been in the past, and there are still maybe places around the world that have not fully embraced this, right? But we will know that we continue to grow when we get to an area where there's a level of comfort in the flight deck to say, here's a problem, let's address it, and let's address it in a way that has a positive outcome. So I think that's what makes it hard to be in either one pilot or into an unmanned environment, from my perspective.
If I may add as well on top of that, I'm still young, so I have a long career to go, and I don't want to lose my job by having automated system in place. Joke aside, technology is there. It depends how you look at technology and how you introduce new technologies into the cockpit environment. What's important is for the pilots, how they are trained to cope with these new technologies and using the human senses in managing the flight deck and managing the flight itself. Is these different variables is very important. You can have a machine to do what is required to do, but if the logic is not there, the machine will not be able to deal with it, and then you need someone to manage the situation, which is using different variables and judgment to deal with the situation.
Sure.
You have the mic, there we go. Thank you very much. Hussein and perhaps Captain Mazrouki, the last time we had the IATA regional forum, as you know, it was about 2 weeks before the attack that we saw on the Russian jetliner in Sharm el-Sheikh. Vitally, what do we learn from that experience? And what do we do about softer targets that perhaps we didn't think of before? Tourist destinations that don't have the infrastructure, perhaps the same safety procedures you see in an Abu Dhabi or Dubai. So you want to start on that, but it is vital to protect the tourism revenues for a country like Egypt or anywhere else in the Middle East and North Africa.
Absolutely. I mean, you rightly said that, John. It's very important to really make sure that the airplanes fly in over safe and secure areas. That's why IATA and ICAO, with working with airlines, have worked very hard on avoiding conflict zones. And we've seen that when Iraq started having some problems, all the flights were diverted over Iran. And of course now, basically, even though the airspace over Syria is not closed yet, nobody flies over it except few airlines. So it is very important that airlines always take protective measures to know where they're flying and how they're flying. Now again, the terrorist act that happened to Metrojet, it just takes one terrorist to be lucky. And unfortunately, I don't think any of us can believe that we can prevent that from happening all the time. We will work very hard on making sure that it doesn't happen. But again, it's something that nobody can guarantee. I think what the airlines have done now, what the airports are doing now in terms of security checks and so on, is very good. It needs to continue to evolve, needs to be updated, just like we have now with the lithium batteries and so on, where they're being banned from flying being on passenger airplanes and so on and so forth. So it is a continuous process. It is a learning process as we move, and I think the cooperation that we're seeing between all organizations, IATA, ICAO, the airlines, A4A, ACO, and so on, is really paying off. And I think the captain can add some more to this.
Anything for me to say, but absolutely, I mean, to add on that for the airline as well, you know, to be more proactive and to be extremely vigilant. The world is, I don't want to say the world is not a safe place, but we have to make it safe for us and for everyone. I mean, when it comes, and we were discussing it with Captain Billy earlier, is when it comes to the world of safety and security, there's no competition here. We're all one team. We work together with airlines behind the scene. We communicate, we share information, and we try to learn from each other and react fast and be proactive, because it takes one act to destroy the whole thing, and we should not allow for any chances, and we should not leave any gaps in between within any airline's operation.
My question is a little bit different. I'm just wondering if you take an airline, for example, and you collaborate and say to an airport, you know, I'm not comfortable with what I see on the ground. Is that what we learned from Sharp, Captain Billy? I'd be curious to get your thoughts of where you have to suggest, look, I'm flying my passengers in, and I want 100% as much as we possibly can, of course, to be reassured that you're doing everything on the ground that you can do, knowing what we've done in the air.
Yeah, so I think most airlines, of course, have security managers, have country managers. I will say part of my portfolio is security as well. So we have almost daily interactions with the TSA. To Hussein's earlier point, we have a very close relationship with IATA, and so really around the globe. Part of this, if we look at it from a risk-based perspective, you're forever assessing, some of which can't be discussed in an open forum, but you're forever assessing the threat. You're forever looking to see, can we detect, anytime something happens, it's something that agencies around the world, including the TSA, can put into their model, right? So there are novel people out there, and the goal is to stay always a step ahead of what someone is thinking about. So it is certainly a task that's never done, and it's something you have to actively monitor continuously.
And that's not only for the security element, but even for a day-to-day operation. You know, we can have, like a few weeks ago in the US when the snowstorm was moving, you know, how you manage the risk in your operation and how proactive you are to manage that risk. And when do you want to say no, and we need to stop here? it takes a lot of courage to say that, but then leaders in the organization, they come together and they decide these type of decision. How strong is the communication between the leaders in the organization? So security is only one element into the whole operation, but managing the whole operation and managing the risk in an airline environment, it is a challenge, but it's something that you have to deal with.
Any more questions? Yes, up there in the fourth row.
Hello, Captain Martin Joel from the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations. I perceive a difference that's evolving from this conversation in two different directions. On the one hand, we clearly need to run safety management systems, security management systems well, and flight decks well. The ability for individual operators, individual people to be able to question, to be able to raise their concerns, to be able to report freely so that the risk can be properly analysed and can be properly mitigated. And at the same time, we talk about automation, strong SOPs, the sort of imposition of a strong, non-questioning process, particularly on the licensed roles. And the only bridge that can bridge that gap is a specific culture that is generated, and it's really good to hear that a multicultural organisation has sought to generate its own language and its own culture, but that culture has to be a questioning culture. And how do we bridge the gap between the automation and strong SOPs at the same time as levelling the authority gradient and encouraging the questioning?
I would just add, one of the things I've always thought is that my ideas around opacity, that is, how clear is an issue and how close to the edge is an organization. And to your point, when you have system in place that are non-punitive, that encourage reporting, that takes a look at all of the inputs, be it voluntary reporting data, FOQA data, black box data, line observation report, IOSA data, all of this comes together in a way that an executive, a CEO, or the senior staff can say, where are we today? He said it very, very clearly and very well, is that we wake up every day and you're passionate about that. Those who operate in this space tend to be very passionate, but it takes more than just a few folks being passionate about it. It has to permeate the whole organization, and I think clearly that's a model that I think Etihad has.
Yeah. I mean, just to add here is what's the commitment, that it's a teamwork. It's when you see the whole team working together in a very close environment and they are trying to support each other, that's a winning game that we are playing in Etihad. And encouraging the employees to openly report, to come to our office. We have an open door policy. Talk to us. We reach to a level of I would say transparency and trust between the crew community and the pilots community. After landing, they walk into the office. I would like to review my data, and I would like to see what happened on my flight. When you reach into this type of trust between organization and employees, where we continuously build on this trust, and we support each other to make sure that we are giving the right tools to our staff and to conduct their work in a safe manner. I think that's a success story which we always try to share here.
Okay, I'm afraid we've run out of time. If there's any very quick last-minute questions, then I can take one more, but no. Other than that, I would like to thank all of you for this really interesting debate, and thanks for coming.